ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول كل بدعة ضلالة.
The question was, what should the Muslim stance be on Hamas? Our criterion is that we evaluate everybody with the Quran, the Sunnah, and the way of the Salaf. And the rectification of the earth can only be done by that with which the messengers and the Messenger of Allah ﷺ rectified the earth. And that was on the basis of Tawheed, the purity of creed, the purity of heart, sincerity to Allah, righteous actions upon the Sunnah, and strength of conviction in the hereafter, the sound creed. And that's why the companions, in such a short time, they conquered the east to the west with minimal resistance, as I said to you, right? And droves and droves of people entered into Islam willingly by seeing the beauty of Islam overwhelmingly. We're not denying that there weren't military conquests. That's just the nature of empire. But in a very short time, you know that it went from the east to the west. And that aid and support was on the basis of what is in the hearts of sound belief, purity of creed, veneration of Allah. Now, when you have the situation that you have, and you see the sad and pitiful state today, where you have amongst the Muslims, you have, for example, the one who believes Allah is everywhere, the one who believes the companions were all apostates, or most of them, the one who believes, you have the communist, right? So you have the socialist, you have the communist, you have all of these people, all of these beliefs, all of these doctrines. And what are they fighting for? They're fighting for worldly grievances. It becomes like, it devolves into a worldly issue, right? And so you have mixed within all of that, you have sin and disobedience in the Muslim nation. And we're speaking about the ummah as a whole, right? Nobody is exempt from this, right? The ruler and the ruled. It's everybody, right? We have all of these things present, and which means that it's really not possible for Allah's aid and Allah's support to be given to the ummah in the way that it was to the Sahaba, because we have all of these barriers and hindrances to that. And so therefore, when we come and look at these kind of groups which are present, whether it is Al-Qaeda, whether it is Daesh, ISIS, whether it is Hamas, whether it is, whatever it might be, then they are part of the reason why we have these problems and we have these issues, and we are not receiving the aid and the assistance of Allah Azza wa Jal. And we have to also keep in mind there are many, many dynamics to the situation. Some of these groups are propped up by the Raafidah, the Shia. They have their own designs in the region, like Iran, Hezbollah. These are the enemies of Allah, right? And we shouldn't be deceived into thinking that they care for the Palestinians, right? This is a political expediency for them. I don't know whether you've seen, there's videos of some of these Shia imams being very frank and honest. This is where you really hear the truth, right? Just like, with a lot of these rabbis, when you hear their statements, right, which you're not going to come across, they tell you the real truth. In the same way, some of these clerics of the Shia, the statements of these, I just saw some the other day saying, what's all this Palestine thing? These are Sunnis. Right? Who cares about Palestine? The Jews are better because even though they're upon disbelief, it's better for us to live with them. Whereas with the Palestinians, because they consider them to be hypocrites, like Sunnis are hypocrites, right? Because they ascribe to Islam, but really they're not. So who cares about them? That issue doesn't even concern us at all. And we'd rather live with the Jews, right? That's what the Raafidah, the clerics are saying that. Okay. So, these are the people who are supporting Hezbollah and Hamas and whatever. So you have to ask, okay, if they engage in a battle or a war, that is in order to gain strength and preponderance over the Sunni nations and populations, and to gain a tactical advantage, in the region. And if there is any fighting that takes place, who knows that they won't even that there not going to be any collaboration between the Rawafid and the Yahud to target the Sunni, right? Because this has happened in history. In history, this has happened. It's known about the Rawafid that this is what they do, right? So because there are some dynamics in place, it becomes a very, very confusing situation. And that's why the common person shouldn't really speak on these issues, because he's going to put himself into trial. But what we do say is we make dua for the Muslimin in whichever place they might be. We aid them and support them in whatever way we can, with dua, with sending of wealth through legitimate channels for relief, making sure that it is through legitimate channels, and it's not going to any kind of extremists or whatever like that, because this issue of wealth and charities, we have to be very careful with that, so that the relief reaches them of medicine, of food, of drink, of clothing, or whatever it might be, and to make dua. That's what we can do. And, to pray at night and to make dua for them and do whatever we can. And also to make dua for the leaders of the Muslims, that Allah, gives them support and aid in doing that which is correct. And, this is what we can do. But the wider issue here is, just like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, in his time there was an issue when the Mongols came from the east, and the people came out and they were scared and terrified, and they started going to the graves and seeking refuge in the grave of Abu Umar and so on and so forth and whatever. And so the scholars at that time, they fell into two groups. They differed. Some scholars said, well, we have to engage in jihad to repel the Tatars, to repel the Mongols. Some others said, no, not really. It's not really the right time to be doing that. So this actual dispute broke out amongst the scholars of that time in the presence of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he advised that we have to spend the time purifying the hearts of the Muslims and inculcating Tawheed in their hearts. So they did that for many, many years. And after that, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, rahimahullah, that the Muslims had so many tremendous victories that they never ever had before. And that's because of the power and strength of Tawheed that it has in aid and assistance in this life. So, but the thing is that this is the long, difficult, bitter path and bitter pill for people to swallow. Because of the absence of being nurtured upon the right creed, Tawheed, and spending time to learn these affairs and to nurture oneself, right, to get that understanding, most Muslims, sadly, they're empty. And they're like vessels who can be filled with emotion very quickly. And that emotion can then be led and manipulated. And that's why, very sadly, when you try to explain these things, you're going to get an emotional response from the average Muslim, because he does not appreciate these things, that there are laws and rules in Allah's creation by which things happen, right? And there are ways and means, causes and effects, and and they're not willing to see that because it's all raw emotion. And this is the difference between the one who can rein in his emotions with knowledge and with understanding and with certainty of what Allah has mentioned in His book, and the one who is just, and that's why you see people protesting on the streets all across you, which is fruitless. What's the benefit in that? And this is here where we really see the stupidity or the harm of people like Hamas, for example. First of all, they are a creation of the Israeli right and the Zionists to begin with. This is a well-established matter that they were funded, brought into existence for the specific reason of having a constant enemy so that they can do away with any kind of peaceful negotiation. Why? Because this whole project is expansionist in its nature, right? It is intended to expand and to take over that region. So therefore you need constant threat, hostility, controversy, right? And so because any talk of negotiation, sitting down, whatever, it kills that warmongering spirit. So these people tactically, they supported the creation and putting these Hamas people in power. This is well known, right? Even up until like the last few years, you're going to find statements of theirs saying that, openly Hamas is an enemy, secretly Hamas is an ally. We have to fund Hamas, right? So you have to imagine like the hypocrisy of on the one hand, you're funding Hamas. Let's get Hamas to rule over the Palestinians. Let them have democratic elections. Let the Palestinians vote in the Hamas. Let's put all this in place, right? And then, because they're going to be hostile and they don't want any negotiations, they just want whatever, that will then serve our purpose of saying to the world, see, they want to destroy us and whatever, and when hostilities break out, we can then use it as an excuse to expand, the region and to take over the Gaza and whatever. This is a ploy, it's a trick, it's a tactic that they are using. And then you see all these crocodile tears about, when the tool or the creation, which is Hamas, does what they want Hamas to do, which is to commit atrocities, so that they can then say, look, we now have to, clear out Gaza of the terror, because that's what you planned all along to begin with, right? And then you're making this pretense to the world as if somehow, So these groups, whether it's Daesh, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, they are simply tools and creations for geopolitical agendas, right? And these people have ended up in this situation because they are not founded upon, the issue isn't for them Tawheed and Sunnah. It's worldly grievance. And you can be very easily manipulated and used when that is the basis of your operation and your activities. And another thing as well, don't you find it strange that not a whimper, not a whisper from Daesh? Where's Daesh gone? Where's ISIS gone? Disappeared. Nowhere to be seen. Meaning, wouldn't you expect that they would come along and say, okay, we've now announced, jihad against the Jews or something, which is what you would expect, which is what the West would expect them to do as well, right? Where are they? Nowhere to be seen. They're only present when it comes to destabilizing Muslim countries. That's when they turn up and they show up, right? Right? Nowhere to be seen. So we know that these are creations of the West, and they are simply tools of the West to destabilize countries. But what will happen, for example, now, all of a sudden, maybe Allah knows best, we might start seeing these kind of false flag terrorist attacks start happening in Europe and the US, maybe there'll be some mad kind of extremist idiot or something who will maybe do something here and there. Yes, maybe some of these things might happen. But the context is ripe for these Western kind of intelligence agencies to create these false flag, terrorist bombings that they themselves have been doing for 2-3 decades. They're the ones who've been doing that largely, right? And then just to, and so then all of a sudden ISIS will return. They are back. They've come back now, right? So all of this is, I guess in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, the people of innovation and misguidance, in fact it's exactly as, I think it's Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil, I think is the one. I think he said that, or maybe it's another person. There's a statement where the people of innovation are to the people of Islam like people on the inside of like a fortress who open the door and allow the enemies to come in. This is Ahlul Bid'ah wal Dalal. Right? So in the same way, these kind of groups like the Khawarij, the extremists and the terrorists, those who kill innocent civilians and kill non-Muslim civilians and, bomb places and whatever. These are like the Trojan horse. These are the people who open the door to allow non-Muslims to come in and to wreak havoc and to use them for their own advantage. This is what these people are, whether it's Hamas, whether it's ISIS, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, whatever it might be. All of these extremist groups, they end up becoming tools. If they never started out as a tool, they end up becoming a tool. Right? And so that's why the whole thing becomes very, very murky, becomes very, very confusing. When you leave the Sunnah and Tawheed, for the people of Sunnah and Tawheed, the affairs are clear. But for people who are not nurtured upon that, things are very, very murky, and so they only have their emotions to kind of really go upon. And that's why in these times of fitan, we have to be very careful what we say, what we speak, and it's a very sensitive issue, as in, this is complex. There's complex issues going on here. But what we can do, we make dua for the Muslimin, for the oppressed. We send them aid, relief for food, clothing, medicine, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to send His aid and His support. And we have yaqeen in the promise of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we know absolutely justice will be done in this life or the next. And that's what we can do, what we can say. We have to continue calling to Allah, calling to Tawheed, calling to the Sunnah. This never stops, right? Because this is paving the way for aid and support, right? So dawah doesn't stop just because of this. We continue because that is the foundation of rectification, right? And it's the moral justification for everything else that follows on from that. So we'll suffice with that, inshallah ta'ala. Allah knows best. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.